I've talked about Deadly Class before on Twitter and done some quick breakdowns of pages on there, so it's about time we talked about it on the Strip Panel Naked show. Wes Craig and Rick Remender do some great work on this book, and it all kind of gets hinged together by the colour work of Loughridge. In this book, he seems to bring a lot of clever inventiveness to colouring the pages, and a lot of it is kind of design shorthand too. And it's actually seemingly because Wes Craig is a smart artist. He knows what's important and what's superfluous detail in a page and panel, and through that combination of his lines and Loughridge's colours, you get something pretty special. We're going to take a look at issue 12 of Deadly Class, and how that combination of Loughridge and Craig creates magic on the page. You're watching Strip Panel Naked, I'm Hass, and I'm going to show you some of the cool stuff lurking in the pages of some of the best comics. So before we kind of get into it, I'll just briefly set up what's happening. There's a group of characters who have been split up. One's here, being held at gunpoint by some baddies, and the other is here, seemingly having gotten away from said baddies, but lost track of the rest of his team. Now, this next page will contain a bit of a spoiler, so if you're at all bothered by that, just go read the book and then come back. So with these locations, Craig does a simple thing. They actually eschew the obvious establishing panel that you see in a lot of Western comics, and they try and combine it within the storytelling of the page. So here, the chap with the scraggly hair at the top of the page, we can see is down some street, regular street, a car driving past, light hitting the walls. When we look below at the other scene, we're next to a big building. The edges around are darker, there's less going on around them, so we're aware it's kind of probably quieter and tucked away. But there's a subtle hint to something. Back in panel 1, we see the we are noise of the fire engine and police car driving past. In panel 3, this new location, we can see it tucked behind the building in the bottom right corner. There's actually nothing to fully draw your attention down there apart from the contrast of colours. You know, there's no guiding lines or anything, and actually most of the dialogue and balloons are kept to the left and middle of the panel. And all the lines of sight are kind of pulling you directly into that same space as well. The sound is there to be heard, but it's not calling tons and tons of attention to it. What it does though is cleverly give us a sense of direction. And there's another little detail in the chain link fence on the left side of the panel, and the chain link fence at the bottom of panel 1, off in the distance. Small, subtle touches to help identify location and place. And then if you look at the bottom half of the page, most of that detail just disappears for both locations. Having established it, Craig knows you don't really need full renderings anymore. You know, we know what these two locations are and who the main players are in each one, so to add more details just to bog down the storytelling. And when you turn the page, you understand the same thing too. You know, most detail is gone from both sets of places, it's just not needed. Or, you know, that is what appears to be the case, until we see what happens on the third page. Let's just roll back and look at the first page we discussed again, because there's more than one reason to start dropping out the background and losing the location. It's for the build-up, to create a real sense of tension. So when the focus stops becoming where we are, and rather what's happening, what are these people saying, we forget about that link of place. And interestingly though, the link is clearly created. This is where Loughridge comes in. Loughridge has also the extra job of colouring two locations differently. Scraggly hair here has yellow, his panels are very, very clearly yellow, and we can see it when we get down to his final two panels below, that's him. So that silhouette on panel 4, we don't really need to see any detail of him or the world to know which character and which scene we're looking at. Very obvious without hitting you over the head with it. Similar for the other scene. The building has this brown lighting and the other panels are also brown, keeping that sense of place. We do see scraggly hair chap leave the yellow though, on his final panel of that page, and he starts to head into the blue. So when we turn the page, we see him in blue. And that's interesting as well, just because it actually creates a sense of movement. I've discussed ways of showing movement before, and a lot of what you think when you picture movement in comics is kind of like speed lines or this heavy progression from left to right, that sort of thing. Here, Craig and Loughridge do it by colour and lighting zones, and allowing characters to move from one piece of lighting to another. It's actually a really clever and subtle way of getting progression across in a way that doesn't have to attribute itself to actual speed. You know, like the character is just walking, he's not moving quickly necessarily. So we see him hit the blue, and then we cut back to the other scene where the brown prevails, but the lighting comes into play, and the chain link fence again. And where have we seen the chain link fence before? And where have we seen that brown lighting before? You know, obviously back in that other scene where this guy's friends are being held at gunpoint. Visual clues abound. And the scene starts to break down at the end as these panels get smaller and tighter, and finally that character enters their space. The brown lighting now hits him and he's officially part of that scene. Look how the palette doesn't shift very much for those bottom 5 panels, they all exist in the same space in a way that the previous 3 panels didn't. And it leads up to that big blam moment on the page turn, and the reason that works is the inevitability brought on by initially setting up the locations as being very close to each other, and then dropping them out so the constant reinforcement is lost, before bringing it back at the end in a quick sequence that heightens the tension. All this is reinforced by Loughridge quietly collecting scenes by colour, and obviously that's writing as well, that's not just the art, but it's writing in terms of the beat pattern and structure. And it's also worth mentioning that this is only 2 pages. There's an awful lot of storytelling and mood and pace being told across a very short amount of time. And it's because Craig and Remender condense the way they want to visually portray it. As I said earlier, you know, we could open these pages with a wide establishing shot, or take a bit more time to show the reveal in panel 2 of the main characters bursting through the door, or even add panels to really help show the location link between the 2 places, but it doesn't need it. So much of comics is reductionism. The face here is a photorealistic face that you take away detail from until you get to a reduced version of what we understand the face to be, but it still makes sense. That face there, an oval with a few lines and dots, we get what that's portraying. So it's nice to see that same reductionism being used in the actual storytelling too. When so much of modern comics refer to decompression in storytelling, shouldn't mean slowing the page of the story down to accommodate that. And if you need some inspiration on how to both tell a long story, but to tell it efficiently, cleverly, effectively, look no further than Remender, Craig, Loughridge and Clayton's Deadly Class. Thanks for watching. This episode was sponsored by Jeff M Art, where you can buy some original art from some great comic artists. There's a link in the description for you to go check out the website and see their full range. If you're a fan of the episode, we'd love you to check out and support us on Patreon, where for your pledge you get tons of extra content. For more comics talk and analysis, you can find me on Twitter at HassanOE. And finally, hit subscribe to keep up to date with all the new episodes, and we'll see you next week.